You are whole, someone carved into the bark of a manzanita and painted it white for ease of seeing. Beyond the stuffed free little library, the curbside box of plump Meyer lemons, the sign in a child's cheerful scrawl, please take and enjoy. One morning, I simply woke, no longer committed to my sorrow, the scrubbed jay nest empty for a second spring, knowing without knowing how it's possible to grow another heart inside the heart, to be the creek that flows beneath the ground in a rainless year. Taking a comfortable seat, and just starting with a deep breath. And as you release the breath, just letting your shoulders fall. And then again, deep breath to the count of 4. And letting your shoulders fall. And paying attention to the stiffness that you're letting go of, the stiffness that is there for the most part all day long. And letting the muscles of the face relax. Around the eyes. The muscles around the jaw. Straightening the neck as best you can. And lengthening it by the tiniest amount, a millimeter. And lifting the chin. And then softening the muscles of the throat. Opening up the heart. Taking down the drawbridge. And just feeling all of that defendedness dissipate for the next half an hour. Straightening the back again. And softening the belly. Feeling the breath begin there from the diaphragm. To the count of 4. And then release to 5 counts. And if it's comfortable, your hands might be facing upward on your lap in that receptive pose. We've been talking about right view, which adjusts our perspective and simply asks, is it true? And right thought, which brings us back to this moment. And we ask, what am I really doing right now? And last week, right speech to further align our speech with what's true and to maybe speak the truth in gentler ways, in slanted ways, and to ask what truth is being spoken to me slantedly through this world of appearances. So slowly this path is supposed to align us with sharper wisdom and more ethical conduct. And even in this practice, we're just aligning our back, our spines, so that that organ of the heart and the head become one thing. Let's take 2 more breaths. 4 counts in. Breathing in, I know this world is an illusory world. Breathing out, I choose this world to help relieve the suffering of others. Tend. You are whole. Someone carved into the bark of a manzanita and painted it white for ease of seeing beyond the stuffed, free little library, the curbside box of plump Meyer lemons, the sign in a child's cheerful scrawl, please take and enjoy. One morning I simply woke, no longer committed to my sorrow. The scrub jay nest empty for a second spring, knowing without knowing how it's possible to grow another heart inside the heart, to be the creek that flows beneath the ground in a rainless year. In our meditations And then in our actions in the world, since we're talking about right action now, we notice our tendencies and we learn to be tender with our own failings. The word tend comes up so much in this practice. And I love this poem for a lot of reasons. One, because the person who wrote it is one of the closest people to me in my life. Colleen Morton Busch, I've known since graduate school, and she's a writer of nonfiction as well as poetry. This comes from her debut poetry book, Smolder, which is going to appear from Ophidia Press in the summertime. It was chosen by Felicia Zamora for a prize. And it's, among other things, about her husband's multiple myeloma diagnosis, which is a disease that is characterized by a smoldering. And the book meditates a lot on how that affects a person, how that knowledge of impermanence, of a slow burning that is happening not just in the world, but in your body, affects your point of view, affects all of the points that we're talking about in this Eightfold Path. And what comes of that? This is one of the central poems. This poem, Tend, because it asks that supreme question: how to grow another heart inside the heart. The idea that there are two hearts. There's the broken one, and then there's the whole one. This poem came up for me just recently because I was talking a few days ago with another dear friend about how I feel that brokenness right now very much. And that brokenness comes in the form of sorrow and anger at myself, anger at the world. And these things, these feelings for me come and they go. I grew up in a house that was wonderful on the one hand, but also very explosive. There were a lot of emotions in the house that I grew up in. And as the sensitive poet of the family, I guess I learned to push down some of the more uh, um, vulnerable emotions and the volatile emotions, and to leave them in a room by themselves, like William Blake's tiger, left there for a long time. What happens when you finally let open the cage? Because you never open the cage. My friend advised me that the best thing that you can do in these situations is to not just feel your anger, but feel it through. And in that way, we tend our anger. We tend the fires in us. Tend comes from Latin. I'm sure many of you know of tendere, which means, I think, at the root to hold a course or to reach across. And in that way, it can be related to tenderness, but also to the way that we tend something in order to control it, but not to douse it, to actually keep it alive. So tenderness is a way of reaching across, but tending a fire is a way of harnessing the fire to get all the good uses from it, to contain it and to keep it alive. I love this form because it's a kind of tending too. You see that it spreads out and then it contracts, and then it spreads out again at the end. So it's a lot like a fire. It's wild and volatile. If you look at it on the side, it looks like the stock market. But within the poem, there are lots of containers. There's the little library stuffed with books. There's the lemons, the curbside box of plump Meyer lemons, and those lemons are like a blaze of fire. There's the nest that's empty but prepared and ready for a second spring. And then there's, of course, the amazing image of the poem, which is the heart inside the heart and the current underneath the parched earth in a rainless year. The contraries of the poem are actually what bring it its vibrancy. If it were just a poem about wholeness, it might land and say something to us, speak to us, but we wouldn't have to return to it. It's actually the contraries that make it interesting. The first stanza sets up the wholeness. That's the easy one. It's the letting go and the generosity that's so related to right action. Right action could be a list of 5 kinds of actions or down to 3 often in Buddhist teachings. But ultimately, we're going to start with the idea that right action is don't steal. Don't steal somebody's happiness. Don't steal other people's money. Don't steal their sense of safety. All of the 5 precepts of right action can be narrowed down to don't steal. And so the opposite of stealing is this generosity that the child is expressing in "You Are Whole," written on the bark of the manzanita. But the second one is the hard one, and that's where tending comes in. It's the reminder that we're suffering and that we can't just put our suffering in a room, lock it up like that tiger, but that we have to feel through our suffering, the way my other friend advised me. And at the same time, know that there is a wholeness that exists within it and underneath it and beyond it. So the question the poem seems to be asking me so poignantly at this moment in my life is, how do I remember the river flowing beneath the parched land and still allow for the waves on the surface? And how do I remember the wholeness of the heart, the absolute flavor of life, that all of this is a dream, while still living through the emotions that are a part of this everydayness and this relative reality in which things break and fall apart and burn and change happens? How do I live twice, as it were? I'll just say one last thing, and it's that Colleen is, in all of her writings, I'd say a fire poet. She's interested in the impermanence that the image of fire teaches us. Her first book is a classic. It's a nonfiction book called Fire Monks, and it's the study of the Tassajara fire of 2008 and how the monks chose to stay and fight the fire rather than leave and let go. And it's this tender balance between when we are being called to act in the world and to address the burningness of the world, and when we are called with equanimity to let go and release. So these monks chose to stay. And here's something that she says at the end of that book, which I just think is a brilliant piece of writing. The present is the only actionable moment, but it's not a moment alone. The 2008 fire came into being because of previous conditions that prepared the forest to burn. The fire left its mark on people, on place, the land, some more lasting than others. It's difficult to pinpoint when it ended or when it began. Even before the lightning strikes, the seeds of fire existed in the dry tree branches and roots. I could say there was fire, then there wasn't fire anymore. But the Buddha's words feel more true. All is a flame. Here's the poem again. Tend. You are whole, someone carved into the bark of a manzanita and painted it white for ease of seeing. Beyond the stuffed, free little library, the curbside box of plump, Meyer lemons. The sign in a child's cheerful scrawl, please take and enjoy. One morning, I simply woke, no longer committed to my sorrow. The scrub jay nest empty for a second spring. Knowing without knowing how, it's possible to grow another heart inside the heart, to be the creek that flows beneath the ground in a rainless year. So going back into the meditation with feet flat, hands facing upward in receptivity. Beginning now at the belly, just softening the belly again. Feeling the rising of the breath and the falling of the breath. Knowing without knowing how, it's possible to grow another heart inside the heart. It's a beautiful teaching in the poem. It doesn't ask us to do anything. And to the speaker, that's the waking up. Knowing without knowing how. It seems that all the elements are present in this poem, especially fire and water. The way that fire is present in the branches before anything bursts into flame, where the seeds of anger are present in us and then are set off under the right conditions. I begin to feel that when all of that volatility arises in me, it hasn't come out of nowhere, or especially the outside, but it was already there. So you might ask yourself, where's the fire in this moment right now? What is changing before your eyes on the one side of the duality? And what is being purified in the way that fire also purifies on the other side of the duality? Fire burns and turns into air. And you might ask, where is the spaciousness? Where is the kshanti, the forbearance? Where are the little opportunities to say, yes, this too? To allow for whatever little fires are burning right now. And the air heavies and turns into water. Water can be a deluge, but Jesus walks on water. Where is the overwhelm in this moment? Where is the deluge? And on the other side, how am I being initiated into a new way of life and being? Water baptizes. We're water beings. We're born out of water. And then water turns into earth again. It sinks down and permeates the ground. What part is dying right now? And then what seeds are being planted? Where are the opportunities for a second kind of life? A second spring, Colleen calls it. Tend. You are whole, someone carved into the bark of a manzanita and painted it white for ease of seeing. Beyond the stuffed, free little library, the curbside box of plump Meyer lemons, the sign in a child's cheerful scrawl, please take and enjoy. One morning, I simply woke, no longer committed to my sorrow. The scrub jay nest empty for a second spring. Knowing without knowing how, it's possible to grow another heart inside the heart. To be the creek that flows beneath the ground in a rainless year.